We recently talked about how Donald Trump is pretty much acting like a mob boss, going around shaking down news organizations for millions upon millions of dollars. Also, they can just join the protection racket to keep them safe from Donald Trump's ire. But this was supposed to be the administration that was looking out for free speech. They were the ones going to protect the First Amendment. These were the ones who were anti-censorship. Remember? That's what they told us. But now we are learning that the White House is banning Associated Press journalists from coming into the Oval Office, all because they refuse to say that the Gulf of Mexico is the Gulf of America. I mean, you really couldn't ask for a more blatant violation of our First Amendment. I mean, you have a administration pretty much saying that these news organizations don't have the independence to cover the news in the way that they see fit. You need to push my narrative, or you can get gone. And Caroline Leavitt was recently asked about this in a press conference, and probably to nobody's surprise, her answer was pretty lackluster. But before she was asked that, she was also asked about what the Trump administration is doing for free speech, free expression. What tangible things has this administration done to be anti-censorship? So let's go ahead and take a look at this video because it kind of gives us an idea of how the Trump administration thinks about itself in relation to the First Amendment. We'll go ahead and watch this video and then discuss. But if you do appreciate the work I do, please do remember to subscribe.
Carolyn, thank you very much to you and President Trump. It's an honor to be sitting here in the new media seat for the White House press briefing and to be able to demonstrate why freedom of expression is so important. Rumble was the victim of censorship at the hands of multiple foreign governments. It's clear there are still many countries who oppose free speech and even target American companies. Can you describe what the administration will do to protect U.S. interests and values worldwide?
Sure. Well, thanks for the very important question. And I think that free speech and ending censorship, both here at home and also abroad, is an important part of President Trump's agenda. I think first, President Trump has led by example on this front as the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, with his show of access and transparency on a daily basis. The president takes questions from all of you almost every single day and really reveals what he's thinking and feeling, and I think that serves as a great example to the rest of the world. As for tangible actions that the president has signed, he did sign an executive order, I believe on day one, certainly within the first week of this administration, to restore free speech and stop government-sponsored censorship here at home. And the EO made it very clear that federal employees are not allowed to engage in any activity that would infringe upon the American people's right of free expression. So I think the president has led quite strongly on this. And
these people literally have no shame. It is their superpower. I mean, how can you go on to say that this administration is leading the way and leading the world in anti-censorship measures when we are learning that your administration is the one that censored a news organization because they weren't toting the party line? How is that even possible? How is it that these people do not see the hypocrisy in their words, in their actions? Donald Trump is known to be very hostile towards any media that is in any way adversarial to him. And he is showing us now in spades that he is even more willing in his second administration to just shut down organizations that he doesn't like. All because he wanted to feel like a big, bad, tough guy and show the world that he reclaimed the Gulf of America. I mean, this is absolutely insane stuff. She's then asked about these journalists who were banned from the Oval Office, and I'm really glad that Caitlin Collins followed up with the retaliation question because I think that is what this really boils down to.
Okay, For you, which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
But isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because the reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the geographical identification name server. And Apple has recognized that. Google has recognized that. Pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America. And it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world.
Just because your president signs a piece of paper that says, we have renamed this body of water to the Gulf of America, doesn't mean that the rest of the world is going to adopt your nonsense. That is just not how the world works. So if the Associated Press wants to continue to call it the Gulf of Mexico instead of the Gulf of America, they should be allowed to do it. But because Donald Trump is such a petulant child and he wants people to only follow his narrative, he is retaliating against this news organization that has been a staple among Americans for hundreds of years. And that is what this boils down to. Of course, nobody has a right to go into the Oval Office or to the press briefing room here. But you're talking about a president who is taking revenge upon a very tried and true news outlet just because they didn't tote the party line. I mean, that is absolutely insane. And to think that this is not an attack on our First Amendment or the free speech rights of Americans is just ludicrous. You guys are completely attacking our First Amendment when you have a president who is acting like a child and shutting down speech that he doesn't like. And Jamie Raskin is rightly calling out this administration for this blatant attack on the First Amendment. Jamie Raskin, as you know, I was a constitutional lawyer or professor, and he is one of my favorite orators. And he is calling out this administration, like I said, for this blatant attack.
Yesterday, Donald Trump banned the Associated Press, a 179-year-old newspaper organization, from the White House because it declines to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. This is straight-up press censorship based on retaliatory viewpoint discrimination. Trump's DOD kicked out 8 news groups that had space in the Pentagon, but which asked skeptical questions of the new secretary, including the New York Times, NBC News, and the Washington Post, all ousted in favor of outlets willing to faithfully advance the party line of the state, like Breitbart and One American News Network.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. That is what this administration has been doing. Like I said, everywhere we look, there is a new attack on the First Amendment. Donald Trump is getting rid of all of these news organizations that are close to the administration if they have been in some way hostile or skeptical towards Donald Trump. I mean, this is textbook anti-free speech stuff. So you cannot go around and claim that your administration is the free speech warrior when you have a president who is going on the attack like this. And to think we're going to replace these tried and true news organizations with people like Breitbart and OANN? Am I really supposed to rely on OAN for reliable news coverage? No. I can rely on them to be Donald Trump's sycophants. I can rely on them to tote the party line. I can rely on them to lie to the American people on behalf of Donald Trump. And that is what Donald Trump is looking for. Raskin then goes on to call out even more attacks from this administration that should be alarming to everybody. Because our First Amendment is supposed to be one of the solid pillars of our democracy. But the Trump administration is waging an all-out war against it.
More sweepingly, Trump and his FCC are using their powers to investigate, sue, and threaten news groups that dare to criticize the administration. Trump is suing CBS for $20 billion in damages because, check this out, he believes an interview with Kamala Harris produced too favorable an impression of her. So that means that I could sue Fox News because I think their interviews with Trump produce too favorable an impression of him. I mean, this is lunacy. And now, exploiting his asserted unitary executive powers, Trump is unleashing his sycophant FCC chairman Brendan Carr on every news group whose stories he doesn't approve of, actually threatening to pull the government broadcast licenses for ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, and NPR. Nothing of a hostile nature, of course, has taken place against Fox News, which is now the de facto state-approved media, enjoys immunity from the repression visited on its liberal competitors. What is this, North Korea?
It's starting to feel a bit like North Korea. It's starting to feel a bit more like Russia. And I think ultimately, that is what Donald Trump wants. Donald Trump is a wannabe authoritarian. He's not interested in being challenged. He has always been very hostile to our media organizations. And now that he doesn't have to get elected for a third time, and he thinks he is operating under this huge mandate of some sort, he's just going all out. He is attacking the First Amendment. He is attacking our free speech rights. It's just absolutely wild to me. So we are going to keep an eye on this, of course. As I said before, we should be able to count on our First Amendment rights. And even though this administration is going around pretending like they are the free speech warriors, everywhere we turn, we see that is just not true. Donald Trump is trying to install a state-run media. And now he's deploying foot soldiers like Brendan Carr to go after organizations that he doesn't like. We are living through unprecedented times at this very moment. And Donald Trump is probably the number one attacker of the First Amendment that our country has seen in modern history? In quite some time. So do not let these people tell you that they are the First Amendment champions. Do not let these people tell you that they are anti-censorship, because the moron-in-chief is going around waging an all-out war on news organizations that might be a bit adversarial to him, because he is a petulant man-baby, and his ego is too fragile to have just the slightest bit of pushback to his grandiose theory and conspiracy of the world. So I will leave it there for now. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We are trying to build something here on the left that can adequately push back against the right-wing media ecosystem, because they just shovel Donald Trump's shit without any pushback at all. They are the state-run media that we talk about. So if you do appreciate the work I do, please do remember to subscribe. If you do want to see how Donald Trump is acting like a mob boss and going around and shaking companies down for millions upon millions of dollars, please do watch that video on the screen now. It is a doozy. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.